Do, 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 do. Hello. Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome in. Welcome, welcome. Just getting a little used to the live stream settings. They've changed a little bit since last time I done this. Thank you all for being here. This is Sunlight 101 for Families, and I'm so excited to share as always. So there should be a chat. You're welcome to use the chat and put in any questions if you want to. Okay, kicked off the chat. All right, great. And sharing my screen. All right. Here's this. And I don't know if I will be able to share my screen and you all see me. So let me know. I now don't have visibility on you. Let's see. Technical difficulties here just a little bit. Anyways, welcome. Today I'm sharing Sunlight for Families. This is my beautiful daughter, my third daughter, and this is where the whole journey of Brighter Days, Darker Nights started. We had a scary thing happen after her birth, and we ended up spending a bit of time in the NICU. It was a very short time. I've heard some incredible stories of families who have been through similar things as what we went through and much more severe things. But that time showed me so much about the current state of awareness. So at this time, I had been experiencing circadian health and learning about sunlight for quite a while. But we had a crazy thing happen that year, which maybe some of you guys can relate to. And it was a wildfire. And so during that wildfire, we actually got evacuated. And so we ended up at the end of the pregnancy living somewhere where we were not in control of our circadian environment. And it was extremely stressful, and there was tons of smoke, and it was also the height of the tight lockdown. So it was a scary time to be interfacing with the medical system, and we were very limited in who could come and visit us while we were going through this. And yeah, it was just wild. And anyways, spending that time there taught me that most nurses and most medical professionals don't actually know about circadian health or how to effectively prescribe sunlight. So this little picture here down in the corner, this was me, and I really had to fight to get this, but going to the window for light. So sometimes you'll hear some really dogmatic things like, light through the window, never sunbathe through the window, and that kind of thing. You'll just hear all kinds of conflicting advice about sunlight. So that's part of why I'm here to teach and share as to let's get the facts straight and let's get the practice of it there for today's families. So this class, Sunlight 101 for Families, and also welcome to Brighter Days, Darker Nights. My name is Nico Kennedy, and I came to all of this through my background wanting to improve the way that we're welcoming babies into this world. I have been a postpartum doula since 2011. I later became a labor doula. I have a bachelor's degree in biology and psychology. I was pre-med. I wanted to go and become an OBGYN until I realized that that was more of a surgical training, and that's not the support that I personally wanted to give. It's great that all of that, medical system is there for when it's needed. However, a lot of the things that we can do to support families actually happen much before the medical system is needed. And that's where I wanted to interface to help families avoid all of this whenever possible. So this is not medical advice. I'm a doula. This is informational support that you can carry on and take into your own life. And this sunlight and circadian rhythm stuff also comes from my background as a quantum biology practitioner, where we're using, studying light and mitochondria and all of these things to help create the environment for health to arrive naturally. So, as you all know, this current state of sunlight advice is very conflicted. You'll hear a lot of different things. And I wanted to start out by sharing the very real risks and the very real benefits of a of sunlight, right? So the risks, the worst, sunstroke, very acute situation, can be fatal. Heat fatigue, on the way to that, very dangerous, definitely want to avoid. Dehydration, likewise, that's what kind of kicks off that other, that cascade towards acute, terrible exposure. Sunburn, very uncomfortable. One that's not talked about very much, manic episodes. So a parent with bipolar or schizophrenia is going to need to be careful with suddenly increasing their light exposure because it can contribute to those manic episodes. Potentially cancer or eye damage. You'll hear a lot more about those those long-term chronic conditions, which are kind of outside of the scope here. But if you want references and resources for all of that, we have that inside of Brighter Days, Darker Nights. And I also can refer you to other clinicians who deal more in those spaces. So what are the benefits of sunlight? Circadian rhythmicity, of course, we're going to talk a lot about that. Vitamin D, that's the one everyone knows about and is also kind of conflicted. What do supplements do? What about sunlight? How do those fit together? Cardiovascular benefits, blood pressure. Also, I didn't have on here, metabolic. There's a lot of evidence about metabolic issues. Metabolic. Okay. We also have motor and immune and eyesight and mood all can be benefited with natural sunlight. And a big one that really counterbalances the skin cancer narrative is reduce all-cause mortality with a proper sunlight exposure. So there you go. The main risks and benefits that I see and that I've read a lot of literature about that we can activate with good sunlight exposure. And if we're not doing it right, those risks are there. So this is partially why prescribing sunlight is so complicated right now. It's complicated by multiple factors that are personal and environmental. And this is why the professional advice is always to ask your pediatrician. But the problem is, in my experience, a lot of pediatricians aren't actually well-versed in the full understanding of sunlight's risks and benefits and how to make it work for your specific situation. So some of those individual factors are going to be your melanin and other genetic factors, your diet, your sleep, your mental health, and work schedules going on with your family. And then there are those environmental factors, your latitude, climate, and season. So what this means is that because of all these multifactorial things going on, at present, we don't have one single sunlight protocol that will work for every single family. And that's why the advice is to go and work with someone, a professional who can help tease out all of these things and help you design a custom strategy. This raises the question, is it possible to create a simple, safe, effective, and universal sunlight protocol for families? I'm going to say yes, it is. I think we have a lot more research and information available now. And, the global community of families working this are also contributing their wisdom to all of this as we're starting to see more and more families pushing back on the current narratives. Oh, one I forgot here. Okay. The risks here, one of the other risks that I forgot is that no proven safe for babies. We don't have any any sunscreens that are proven safe. And in fact, a lot of the current sunscreen formulations that are used right now are actually, they say that babies don't have the detox capabilities to actually let those out. So even if you go to like the us.gov website, they will recommend, part of the reason they recommend babies don't go out in the sun is that they say, well, there's no sunscreen that's safe for babies. So don't be putting sunscreen on babies because of, that is an untested new thing. So that's part of the complication and risks there. Okay. So can we make an effective and safe protocol? So with balance and education, yes. So I say the protocol is always going to rely on the provider who is giving the protocol to have time to work with the individual family that's going to be implementing the protocol. So safe and effective sunlight recommendations for families. I have found this is my twofold method. I call it stabilize, then strengthen. So what is stability? Stability comes first. Stability means that nighttime sleep is anchored and consistent. This is especially important for The mood, anchoring mood. This is also very important for anchoring health and autophagy and, the body healing, resting, repairing overnight as it's meant to. So we need to have stability before we can work on the strength. Sunlight fits a lot more into the strengthening side of things. Sunlight, we are increasing the contrast between day and night, right? So strength is how high is that contrast, and there are a number of factors that can make day more day-like and night more night-like, and that is a lot of what we're doing, figuring out how to implement those day-to-day, night-to-night habits as families, where it gets complicated by, new babies being up in the middle of the night, or toddlers, or, having all of the things that toddlers need. Teens also, we are a family, working in family. The baby of yesteryear is the teen of today, is the parent of tomorrow. So it's really a full circle. Circadian health builds upon itself. Okay, just checking in to see. Wonderful. Okay, I see everyone in the chat. Welcome, welcome. Okay, great. So I call it stabilize, then strengthen. I'd say you could also say that you're using the brighter days, darker nights method. A lot of people wanted to know about how do they talk about this with other people who are afraid of sunlight, that see them doing these things that seem strange. And they're like, how do I talk about this in a way that other people will understand why I'm doing what I'm doing and not argue with me and tell me that I'm, risking baby getting skin cancer and that kind of thing. Like, what we are doing here is a specific method. What I'll say, this: we're not willy-nilly, we're not using excessive sunlight, and we're not being erratic about our sunlight exposure. So that's where a lot of those, the dangers and risks become more of a thing when we have erratic exposure, like people in a winter climate suddenly taking a vacation in the tropics and then spending hours outside in a tropical solar noon. That is very high risk of dehydration, sunburn, heat fatigue, even heat stroke, right? We're not being erratic. We're working slowly. We're working this into our day-to-day lives. We're not being excessive. We're getting what we need and not more, right? So it's not, I use the word willy-nilly because that's, I think, what people are afraid of. They're afraid of people just going out and having all of those risks, and fighting all of those risks. So safe solar exposure for circadian health really depends on being paired against a properly dark night. That's why I say we could call it the brighter days, darker nights method. You could also call it the stabilize then strengthen method, but that's a little bit more technical. Remember, a proper solar day is always going to begin with sunset and how you go to sleep. That's the darker nights part of it, right? So we're not just going straight out and increasing sunlight all of a sudden. We are also doing everything we can for the circadian rhythm perspective, because that's what makes all of the rest and repair and everything go well. When you have slept well, and this is a key thing for everyone who says, I can't get out for sunrise, which I hear a lot, and I totally understand because I've been there too. When you've slept well, you're ready for the morning light when it arrives. So here's the basic morning routine you need for that to happen. The moms in our community are bringing themselves and their babies, children, teens, everyone out into natural light first thing in the morning to program circadian rhythms. And if you're waking up before the sun, you're using a natural light source, or at least one that's not straight into the super bright. That, what you want to think of is your pupils from the nighttime. They are very dilated, and you're slowly opening the pupils up. You're not having them constrict super fast in that way that feels really shocking and disorienting. So if it is before sunrise, you're using candlelight or incandescent bulbs, amber or red LEDs, if that's what you have. If you're up before the sun, you're just thinking of this as greeting the day, and you're going to do a slow start, right? We could also think of it as like the slow start to light. Or maybe the slow start to bright. We're making this up here as we go along. Okay. The slow start to bright, right? And so this can be shorter or longer, and that also depends. Like anyone who lives in a climate with a long swing knows that sometimes sunrise can seem super short, and sometimes it can seem super long, and you are kind of flowing with the seasons as you get deeper into this. And then that you can pair with a morning breakfast, leftovers, jerky, cheese, boiled eggs, dried, stewed, or fresh fruit, kind of depending on the season. Any of those things, those breakfast items can come along. And this is especially important for those moms with hungry toddlers who will get super cranky if you just take them straight outside. A lot of times those toddlers, especially when they're still in the weaning stage, really need their food first thing in the morning. And we all really need to eat in the morning to anchor our circadian rhythms. We have, this is really about sunlight, but this other piece of the meal really fits into it on the practical side. So alternatively, those could be eaten right, your breakfast can be eaten right when you get back inside. But having your breakfast prepared of something like this that is easy and quick is really going to be key towards helping you have a good, stable light routine in the morning. Now, things get more controversial when we look at ultraviolet light and the UV windows. And so this is probably the most technical part of this presentation because I did want to make this a 101, but I also want you to be prepared with simple answers for the pushback that you naturally get as you talk about these things. So, number one, the sun always shines the same light, right? The sun is a constant. It's always shining. I mean, we have solar flares and things like that that do impact it. But overall, you think of like the sun is shining the same light. But the angle of the Earth, right, as the Earth spins, we're seeing more or less light. The light is passing through more or less of our atmosphere. So this is to help you understand because I've heard a lot of people searching and they say like, they've heard about the UVA rise, but when they go and search in their browser, they will see that the mainstream opinion is that UV is present in any kind of sunlight. And that is true because the sun is always shining the same light. However, the atmosphere is filtering out enough in the very morning. It takes a while before it's enough that is biologically significant, meaning that our body is responding to the to the UV light that is present in sunlight. Okay. And so this is why at sunrise, when you're going out, you can't convert thyroid hormones. You can't get vitamin D. In order to get vitamin D, you need to be in overhead sunlight. So the easy way to see that is that your shadow is shorter than you. When your shadow is shorter than you are, that is when the light, then it's coming through the top of the atmosphere. It's shorter. There's less filtered out. And that is when your body can actually synthesize vitamin D. So for a breastfed baby to be sufficient, the mom needs, the current estimate is 6,000 IUs of vitamin D per day, and that's a combination of dietary and solar sources. For baby to get it from overhead sunlight, the amount that baby needs on its own, that's, I think, only about 20-something minutes of overhead light per week. So people have said, they've asked me, they're like, I've been told that baby only needs 15 minutes of light. Is that real? And yes, when you're looking at the UV, that super bright, intense overhead sunlight, or sometimes they'll talk about it as afternoon sunlight. I like to say overhead because it's more specific. And yes, that is a small amount per week. It's really not very much, but depending on a season or latitude, it may not be available at all. So mom's needs and baby needs, right? A mom probably needs more than that. She has more melanin in her skin. Babies naturally are born with less melanin and other factors that make them absorb that light super fast. So how can mom meet her need and baby meet its needs together, and especially if with solar exposure being part of the things that you're doing to increase your vitamin D. So moms, you can maximize your own exposure by wearing less clothes. The more skin you have available, the more skin you have, to the sun, the more skin is going to be generating that vitamin D. So while you're doing that, you can also keep baby in your shadow. So then you're absorbing the UV light and blocking it from reaching your baby. A lot of moms are concerned about heat. So a breastfeeding mom, and interestingly, women who are not breastfeeding and dads don't have this cooling effect. So a non-breastfeeding mom or dad has been shown like their body will still regulate baby's temperature, but a breastfeeding mom is more effective and can also cool baby by about 2 degrees. So that's pretty awesome in terms of skin to skin. One of the other questions that I've been hearing a lot are about baby getting heat rash. And so that is where staying clean and the gut health issue. So that is, definitely something with mom's digestion. How mom's digestion is going to change how the breast milk, the composition of the breast milk, and all of that. So that's a little bit more of a complicated situation with the rashes issue, but a lot of moms say it seems to have to do more with the heat than with the light exposure there. And so another thing is that you can help keep baby cool with like cool rags or a mister. There's a lot of things that you can do. So then the other thing mom can do is prioritizing dietary sources for herself. And a lot of those dietary sources of vitamin D, you can look up foods that are high in vitamin D. Those tend to be the foods that are also good for postpartum recovery and breastfeeding, right? So those are the strategies for helping them to balance. Here's the key point I want you to understand is that total sunlight needs are higher than the overhead sunlight needs. And this is where people get really confused because they'll see me say things like, babies only, for vitamin D, babies only need a small amount of that direct sunlight exposure. However, we'll see the best, motor development, moms having the best moods, and eyesight development in the first 6 months of life are also really important outdoor time directly correlated to all of that. So for those numbers, for the general health, also immune system, those numbers are all actually at 1 to 2 hours. This is based on circadian entrainment data from a very large UK cohort. And they found that most people will end up with a morning chronotype, which is considered a healthier circadian rhythm, based on the morning chronotype being associated with better health across the board. And that is 1 to 2 hours per day. And even in baby cohorts under 6 months, we also see 2 hours or more being the babies having the best outcomes. So that is why there's such a large spread for how much. And so you just remember the target for overhead light can be much lower depending on the season than the target for overall sunlight exposure. And then I know the question next that follows this when you're looking at that, like it's easy even in the winter to think about getting 15 minutes of light, but that 15 minutes of light in the winter is probably not going to actually bring in the vitamin D, which is where the dietary source is, and stored vitamin D also really come into play. Stored and recycled vitamin D are another thing that is vastly overlooked in a lot of narratives that I've read about sunlight vitamin D supplementation questions. But it's interesting for winter communities, there's a Scandinavian tradition of outdoor napping for their babies. And this was naturally creating the conditions where those winter babies were still getting a lot more outdoor time. Even though it's not in direct sunlight, just that natural unfiltered light makes a really big difference. So, of course, use your judgment. And we also had questions about like red light therapy in the wintertime because a lot of our modern lights have had the heat stripped out. So a lot of you guys are super savvy and need a little bit more than just the 101 version. So looking at photobiomodulation being one of the, key things that we're looking for from sunlight, not just the UV exposure, for hormones like vitamin D, not just the light exposure for circadian rhythms, but also the photobiomodulation effect. And so are red light panels safe? They're really, I haven't seen anyone testing them in there. The EMF exposure, and remember, those are still isolated frequencies. So there are some tricky things there. Infrared lights and candles and having a wood stove. Think about all of the ways that we naturally used to get light and heat together in the wintertime. And remember that skin to skin. You're also, your baby is absorbing that heat from your body. So you're kind of a source of all of that for your baby. So we did morning light, then we did afternoon light, and then we did sunset light. So sunset offers a wind down opportunity, right? Everyone talks about watching sunrise, but what about sunset? And as we get into this, I want to bring up this anecdotal risk that I've heard from the community, especially for teens, that if sunset is the first outdoor light seen, it can instead have a wake up effect, right? So ideally and, practically what this means is that for sunset to be most effective, there has to have first been the exposure to the morning and the afternoon sunlight so that evening sunlight isn't perceived as the body as sunrise, because outdoor light is so much brighter and more complex and has so much more information for our bodies compared with artificial light. Okay. And so then after sunlight, keeping lights low, lower than eye height, and avoiding white. So white LEDs, white fluorescents, right? Things that are going to stimulate daytime physiology, ideally from sunset to sunrise, those are out of the picture. And that is the darker nights component to safe solar exposure in the day. So always, always, always remember the importance of the complementary dark night. And darkness defined specifically. So you've heard people say you shouldn't be able to see your hand in front of your face. It should be pitch black. And I find for families that isn't always so helpful for us because we are getting up to check on our babies in the middle of the night. We might need a little bit of light for breastfeeding, that kind of thing. So what you want is actually physiologically under 1 lux, which is the light of a single candle flame or the full moon. That is actually what is going to, so you can't have full dark, but maybe you have a motion sensitive red light on the, near the floor outlet that can turn on so that you're safe when you need to move about to take care of your family. And you can increase the effect of the dark night with cooler temperatures, quiet environment, obviously. For families that find it helpful to use a white noise machine, you want to make sure that that shuts off after, basically as soon as possible so that you move from that noise into the quiet. It's not good to run a fan or white noise machine all night long. Ideally, this is intimate. So you don't have strangers or people you're not comfortable with in your space. That's obvious. But what's not so obvious is like movies and TV shows and everything are putting strangers in your face and your body can respond to all of that in a way. So ideally, TV isn't so much a part of your evening post-sunset routine. We could say also there's another little buffer here that you can do, especially in the wintertime. You could have under 10 lux. Okay, so under 10 lux, under 10 lux during wind down time. So a lot of like circadian rhythm, like if you look at circadian rhythm architecture, like how to set up an environment for proper circadian entrainment, they'll often go through this where we have the 10 lux setting for wind down time for the 2 hours leading up to bed, and then the under 1 lux setting for when you have a full, like when you're actually sleeping. Okay. And then fasting is another one that is kind of beyond the scope of this 101, but we talk about it a lot. We did a meal, like a meal planning and food circadian rhythms class a little while back. You can find it in the membership archive. And there's also some articles that I've written about what is proper circadian rhythm fasting, because that's another one of the areas you just hear so much conflicting advice, and especially as a family, what works for a family. Okay. So the heads up as you're doing all of this perfect, you have your morning, afternoon, evening, and nighttime rituals. And so one of the things I want to give you a heads up with, because this can really throw people for a loop. If nights are much shorter or much longer than 9 hours, right? If you're in a polar climate, basically in high summer or high winter, or if you're experiencing unavoidable heat and humidity, if you have a very extreme climate in that direction, or if you're in an acute stage, early postpartum, if you suffer from migraines, if you're in a healing crisis, any of those triggers, and you're doing the circadian light work, you may experience a stronger circadian polyphasic sleep pattern as you adopt this more circadian rhythm supporting lifestyle. So I want to throw that out there and share what those patterns are. So this is when you wake up and you're in a circadian polyphasic pattern, you won't feel anxious, you won't feel hungry, you'll feel calm, alert. It is very smooth. If it feels jarring and shocking, nightmares, all of that, those indicate problems, stress problems, nutrition problems. But if you're waking up and you're feeling super calm and you're just suddenly awake, here's what that could look like. In the summer heat pattern, looks like later bedtime. You just don't feel ready for bed yet. And then the other one is, and then in the day, in the afternoon, as that heat peaks, you're probably going to start feeling really sleepy. You can succumb to that siesta through the heat of the day. If you need to nap, ideally it's less than 20 minutes or more than 2 hours. And then I say the heat of the day is common, but morning or early afternoon are the ideal for that. I don't really recommend initiating a nap later in the afternoon because it can interfere with bedtime. So ideally that nap is happening early morning or early afternoon. Obviously, little babies are going to be napping a lot more, and that's a whole other topic, but this is for the moms. Okay. And the winter pattern, here's what you could expect if you're in a winter circadian polyphasic sleep. If that starts showing up, you would probably, how it would feel is you're really tired and you want to go to bed super early. And then, especially when the moon, because the moon gets brighter in the wintertime, it's at a higher angle in the sky. So then you might be up with the moon and you might find that you're awake for 2 to 3 hours in the middle of the night. And again, you're not going to feel anxious, racing thoughts, all of that. You're going to wake up and feel calm. And then after you have been awake for a little while, you'll have a second sleep until dawn. And in the winter pattern, we won't see adults napping because you naturally want to maximize all of the daylight time that you have in the winter. So those are the patterns. Here are your next steps, and then I'll open up in the chat if anyone has questions. So if you're in early pregnancy, come in. I have circadian pregnancy workshops, and those will give you a lot more of the detail and science of everything you need to really implement and feel confident in all of this. If you're in late pregnancy, I recommend you come in and watch the light and labor and postpartum planning workshops to figure out how light will factor into all of your planning for that. If you are already postpartum, then I recommend instead jumping into the circadian polyphasic sleep and the circadian baby workshops to look at your postpartum recovery and also how your baby's circadian development is going to unfold. If you're a practitioner, I have two offers. One is the research library where you can get all of the source citations. It's currently over 1,300 articles that I have curated in there for you. And I also have perinatal practitioner mentorship where we have lessons that go through fertility and pregnancy and birth and postpartum, all of that. So if you want to join those, I recommend you upgrade to the Quantum tier, and then you'll get a coupon for $300 off of my practitioner mentorship so that you have all of this Brighter Days, Darker Nights material where you're reading kind of how I talk about it for families. And then you get my practitioner lessons over there. So you have both and you can kind of overlay it and see how I'm thinking about it as a practitioner, communicating to the parents. And if you want one-to-one or have questions, I do one-to-one, practitioner mentorship as well as one-to-one work with families. You can email me, Nico@brighterdaysdarkernights.com. Alrighty. Okay. Ways through that. Okay. Awesome. So now we have a little bit of time here for questions. I see a couple in the chat. I'm going to scroll back through and see what we say. Any feedback or questions, throw them in now so I can get to them. All right. Okay. Yeah. SF. Thank goodness you included this part. I just got into a conversation this weekend about circadian health, et cetera, and feel like I didn't explain it very well. Yes. I really wanted you all to be equipped because people will have questions if they see you going out without sunglasses, bringing your baby outside, all of that. So I'm glad that was helpful for you. And then next question, is it okay for baby to go to sleep in a naturally lit room rather than use blackout curtains if it's summer and bedtime is 7 p.m.? Yes. So I always recommend that you try to keep your indoor environment as similar as possible to what's happening in the natural outdoor environment so that you're connecting your circadian rhythm, your children's circadian rhythm to actual solar time. It gets so much more complicated anytime that you're going to be trying to tweak your circadian rhythm outside of what's happening with the natural daylight. So I do have resources for that, especially for those families. I know a lot of women's husbands are on swing shift or night shift, or even I've had women come in who've been working night shift and they want to have a baby. And so how do they get their circadian rhythms honed in while they're in that transition phase of trying to either make night shift work or trying to transition to another career? So but the gold standard is if you just think of circadian rhythm as understanding nighttime and daytime fitting with your natural solar nighttime and daytime, that's just the easiest way to stay everything on track. Next question, can you elaborate on why it's not good to run a white noise machine all night? Yes. Your circadian rhythm, your ears they're full of circadian clocks. So the ears, if they hear noise going, then there's slight activation. And so sleep just doesn't happen as deeply as when it's dark. And so One of the other things that I recommend is, like, especially for moms that are alone with their baby, moms who just have one baby, especially, this is really common, and their husband goes back to work and they're just alone with their baby and they end up spending so much time quiet. Um, in the day, and so then nighttime comes and they haven't really had that noise ceiling, lift in the day. So for those moms, sometimes listening to, an audiobook or listening to music in the day or getting outside, all of that can help to make the daytime more noisy so that the nighttime feels more complementary against it. So I hope that kind of helps to explain that. And then next question, what do you think about audiobooks in the evening if it's soothing, familiar voice? Yeah, exactly. So audiobooks can be a good way. A lot of people do, we always have like the bedtime story, but I actually do stories more of like a lunchtime, daytime, pre-nap activity. And then in the evening, I prefer lullabies and we all sing. So we're actually on the calendar, we have a call coming up where we're going to be talking about lullabies and sharing our favorite lullabies. I'm going to teach you a couple songs maybe. People ask, what's your lullaby list? So, um, because a lot of us didn't grow up. Like, I don't remember my mom ever singing a lullaby to me, but my husband insisted that I learn lullabies. So I had to teach myself from scratch. We're going to talk about that um, when we have a whole month coming up that we're just going to have the sleep theme. Okay. And then, spring and summer when sunset's very late and the kids are tired but not ready to sleep yet. Um, that is the time where, audiobooks are totally a nice tool. And, there's kind of like the scale of everything. Some people also, they're like, we really, really just want to watch our movies. And so if you're watching movies in that kind of sunset time, especially in the summer, you can get like a full red shift on your screen or get to at least block out the red light. And then for that time, like just recommend choosing movies that are like calm and familiar rather than a super amped up, exciting movie that you guys have never seen before and it's a surprise for everyone. Instead, something that's more familiar and calm. Okay. Uh, Question here. Curious about how the polyphasic sleep relates to Chinese medicine, where they say that the liver detoxes from 1 to 3 a.m. and you should be asleep during this time. Yes, absolutely. So the liver is another one of the organs that has an extraordinary amount of circadian clocks, and it definitely, that is also, so I'm going to go, for these questions, any of the questions about the liver, you want to go take my quantum anemia theories section inside of Brighter Days, Darker Nights, and I go all in on understanding the liver. We're going to have a post about spleen coming up, and I also have an interview that's going to drop with a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine where we really go into a lot of stuff about sleep and polyphasic sleep and how all that works together. So great question, and we do have a lot to say about that. And then, are there lights that are 1 to 10 lumens, and how can we know if we have less than 10 lumens in the winter after sunset? So, my friend and colleague Sarah Kleiner has an app. It's called My Circadian, and it has a lux meter that's really easy to use. It uses the cell phone camera that you can click it. But if you don't want to use the app, then you could light a candle and then light a candle and compare that candle to the light that you're using. And your light shouldn't be any brighter than the candle is. And a lot of you will be surprised when you do this because candles can actually be super bright. And but it's also like about the frequency tone. So like an incandescent bulb with a nice shade that's down low can actually be okay, especially for like that under 10 lux time. Next question was, is DMinder a good app to figure out the angle of the sun so you can maximize your vitamin D levels? Yes. So I've used DMinder for a long, long time, and it is a great app. And what I recommend for when you're doing sunbathing with a little baby is just you can set it to Fitzpatrick 1 to get those timers, but it will still tell you the UV index and give you an estimate for how much vitamin D that you're synthesizing based on your exact location and time of day. And yes, the My Circadian app also does the vitamin D estimation. So that's great. What about blackout curtains if you live in the city with street lights, home lights, etc. for nighttime sleeping? Yes. So if you live in a place where there's light pollution, you need those blackout curtains, absolutely, so that you can get your dark night and not have artificial light streaming in. Hopefully, eventually, that won't be a problem. I love to see that in the next 5 to 10 years, a lot more places retrofit. We're actually starting to see some communities retrofit. So if you live in a neighborhood that has an HOA, this is a great thing to take to your HOA lobby. That you want there to be a circadian lighting ordinance inside of your community, right? Like local advocacy is amazing. And a lot of places have actually been successfully getting that put into place so that any kind of outdoor light needs to be warm, low, shielded, right? The light is shining where you guys need it for safety, but it's not blasting into the neighbor's windows. And then the other key, if you are in the situation where you have to use blackout curtains, is that you want to make sure that you are opening the blackout curtains in the morning as soon as the sun is up. And this is especially true if you have children sleeping. A lot of moms wake up early and then they're up and bustling around while the kids are sleeping in. So when that's the case, you, mom, want to go in there and open the curtain in your children's bedrooms. Okay, next question. How much sunlight should I be getting if I live on the equator? In Ecuador, it is hot and humid all year round by the coast. What would be the goal? So you're going to want to, you feel into your body what feels good, but ideally, when you have that really, really hot climate, and I know a lot of moms ask this too, you're going to be prioritizing light that is in the early morning and in the late evening, and not having as much probably in the middle of the day. And so that is going to help your body so that you're getting light, but you're not getting just totally pummeled. And this will also be kind of different. This is where the melanin picture comes in because, someone with high melanin content is going to be more adapted and they can handle more of that bright, intense UV index than someone who has very fair skin. So that's, a question when we look at someone with very dark skin who's living in a very polar climate, that they have unique challenges, and someone who has very fair skin that's living in an equatorial climate is also going to have unique challenges compared with if those were reversed there. So I hope that helps. Next question was, if I want to build my 10-week baby solar callus, I still follow being outside only before for UV index, not in direct sun, unless it's early morning. So yeah, the UV index is a great metric you can use to, decide. You can also use the shadow rule. So when shadows are longer than the objects that cast them, then it's more of an infrared photobiomodulation protocol. And the shorter the shadow, the more it's a UV impact. So that is an easy way to kind of look at it. And then one of the things that I just love that's so empowering was a study that came out of Australia. So that was looking at, a lot of those folks who had the very light skin, who are living in a very hot climate, and they were measuring moms and babies and their sunlight exposure. And, they were kind of wanting to test, and they found that the sunlight exposure was much more effective for eczema prevention compared with the vitamin D alone. So the protocol was either sunlight plus vitamin D or vitamin D. And they didn't tell moms specifically when to go outside. They just said, go outside. They just told them to go outside. And they didn't have any adverse reactions in that cohort, in everyone who joined that study and went through it all. And they wore little light sensors. And they found that the babies who were getting 2+ hours outside per day, or it was 14-hour average per week, had less eczema, had the least eczema. And it was a, benefit there. And yeah, none of the babies had any adverse reaction because moms are just so smart. You're also intuitive. You can see your baby. You know when baby's getting enough sun and needs to go. The danger, what I've heard, the only adverse reactions that I've heard were like when a mom was like, oh, I'm going to put the more like toddlers or older kids, but like a toddler outside while I'm inside washing dishes, and she could see them, but she wasn't actually out there with them. And in that case, the baby did get a heat fatigue dehydration reaction, and she felt so terrible, and it was because she wasn't out there to co-regulate and understand how the sunlight was actually impacting. So always be outside with your baby. You're not building your baby's solar callus by putting them out and setting a timer and walking away, right? You're staying there together. Okay, next question was about the noise machine. So she says, my son is 8 and we've used a white noise machine since he was an infant, and for me and my husband as well. Any advice on how to gently remove it over time? So you could just set it on a timer. If it doesn't have a timer itself, you can get a electric timer. And so that would go between, and then it would actually flip the power on your white noise machine. And so you can use it and then just set it to flip off maybe 2 hours after you go to bed, right? So you have it for the first 2 hours and then it flips off automatically, and then see if you wake up or not. Um, that would be one way to give that a try. I'd love to hear how it goes. Um, the next question was curious about your thoughts with bedtime routines. I have a 4-month-old and don't have a routine. I prioritize sunlight throughout the day, including morning. We're all generally outside for sunset as well. I figure the light is cueing him as time to sleep as opposed to an evening routine. Yes, absolutely. So, we're going to be doing a whole class about bedtime routines and lullabies, and a whole sleep theme. I believe it's coming up in October. So I'm going to have a couple of guest experts come in who are sleep experts. And we're also just I have a few posts queued up, and then I'm going to teach that class. So then we can hear from it and get together as moms to share what's working in our bedtime routines. We also have a ton of posts about that in the archive. But yeah, a lot of us are finding that reducing elements of the bedtime routine can actually make it more simple and easy. And in that case, you then are just finding other times to do the things that might be part of the bedtime routine. So, like, I like to have my kids clean up from all of their outside play before dinner so that they're not having to do the bath time right before bed, because I find it super stimulating. It just doesn't fit into my schedule. A lot of families really love the nighttime bath, and in which case you're just making sure that it has the dim lights so that you're not getting all wound up on the light. With little babies, yeah, it's really easy for them to just fall asleep on you. And I find that the temperature and light cues, the temperature cues especially, are correlated with sleep. So light and heat are part of the same electromagnetic spectrum. So heat is just light that, like, our eyes can't visually see, but it's not like of a different quality. It is still there. And so temperature cues really taught our circadian rhythm really understands temperature cues. So one of the other things that you can do is cool them down when babies don't, or children don't want to settle down. So if you have air conditioning, you can crank up the air conditioner and dim the lights, and pretty soon kids will be bedding to go to bed. And then, or you could give them like a cool washcloth, because like you put the water on their face and then it starts evaporating, and that helps cool them down too. Um, Thanks so much for making this available. I'll have to watch the replay. Yep, absolutely welcome, and I will put the replay up soon, absolutely, so you all can watch it, or anyone who missed it. And if you're watching watching this on the replay, the comments will be open, so you can drop your questions into the comments there too. Are you supposed to avoid certain UV index, like above 5 UV index? So I haven't read any research suggesting that. It's really just the amount of time that you spend in it is going to be different. So the higher the UV index, the less time that you need to spend in that kind of environment. But I haven't seen specifically a benefit to always avoiding above a particular UV index. It would just be, notice yourself and figure out what your tolerance is for that. And again, we do end up with a little bit tricky situation, like someone who has a Fitzpatrick 1 who then flies to the equator. They probably aren't going to be primed very quickly. They would need to really build up their tolerance. And there's a post inside pinned to my homepage. I think it's pinned, or you can find it in the archive, and it's called 3 Types of Tans and What They Mean. And so that is really a key to understanding how your body is going to interact with different UV environments. So yeah, I would recommend going and reading that. Okay, the next question was, I didn't full hear what you said about fans. Are they similar to sound machines and not wanting to keep them on all night? We live in Arizona and our house gets so hot we have to have a large fan on in my kids' room. So yeah, you can have it on while they're falling asleep, but ideally you would be able to turn it off later. And again, that temperature and all of that, the thermoregulation is really, really tricky. Yeah, I've been there. We used to get like a sheet wet and we would put that in front of the fan even to increase and have kind of the swamp cooler effect going on because yeah, it is really hard to sleep when it's hot. And if you turn the fan off and then it's really hot and the kids are waking up because they're so hot, then it might be more beneficial to keep the fan on. But if you are able to later turn the fan off and have like a more quiet environment, then that, you just kind of see what works and try different things. Um, and then in terms of sunburn and sun exposure for newborns and infants, is it a certain amount of direct sunlight or is it safe for them to be outside for an indefinite amount of time as long as it's low UV? So, right, when it's when there's not a lot of UV coming through the atmosphere, then they're much less likely they can't really get sunburn from it. So it's more a matter of what's comfortable for you and for them. So it's lovely to set up like a nursing chair outside and you can nurse your baby outside. In terms of the little infants, it's so cute because I noticed that when I bring them out in the early morning, and in that sunset time, that they'll be super alert because the light's not so bright and, like, their eyes are really sensitive, so they'll actually be really alert and be looking all around, and it's really cute. Whereas if you bring them out in the middle of the day, they pretty much will just put themselves to sleep, so you can really kinda watch your baby and see if they're enjoying it and having a good time or not, and you just kinda get used to, reading their cues and feeling what's good for you. And yeah, seeing what is there. And again, a lot of this stuff we're having to find out by our own experience, and there's not as much research on all of this, especially in terms of circadian timed lighting. And also, I talked about the dietary factors and yeah, the sleep factors. So, a lot of the research that's been done is really on circadian disrupted populations and sunlight exposure. And so, in that case, that's where sometimes the literature and what we find in real everyday life, there can be a little bit of discrepancy there. And in time, as knowledge of circadian rhythms grows, and we start getting better, better studies designed, where the people designing the studies are more interested in learning these kinds of things, and testing these kinds of things, that will change it. The thing you were talking about eczema, should you expose eczema patches to direct sunlight or other sunlight? Okay. And this is another great question too, about skin. And so you can look up different skin conditions and see what kind of light. So like psoriasis, particularly, it responds really, really well to UV light. UV light therapy is effective for psoriasis. Others, like if you look at melasma of pregnancy, then that is really going to be more of the red light therapy. So yeah, different skin conditions. That's something you can definitely look up. What kind of light therapy is going to be most helpful for what type of skin condition? Um, but yeah, generally, I do find that exposing skin conditions to sunlight is beneficial and often can help them go away. But you just want to make sure that you're, yeah, getting the right light times for what your condition is. And then a lot of that stuff also, like some families with all of this stuff will find that they may need to like use vinegar to strip out detergent residues from their child's clothing. That's a really common one that can contribute to these skin conditions. So changing detergents or, and getting their clothes stripped of detergent residue can also really be helpful. And then working on gut health and improving the gut lining, mom getting direct sunlight on her belly, because her digestive fire is going to help her milk to be more fully digested and not have undigested stuff coming through that the baby can react to. So there's, definitely any kind of eczema or skin issue usually is going to need a multifactorial post. And I also have a lovely friend who's a naturopath. And she does virtual consults, and she has been around and around and around with eczema, and she is fully versed in circadian biology and quantum biology. And she's a naturopath. So if you are having severe issues or persistent issues that aren't going away, her name is Angela Jensen. And you can look her up, or I can give you a direct referral to her if you need that. And then last question. Thank you so much. I was worried about direct sunlight and scares about sunburn. Yes. And so, yeah, if your baby does get a sunburn, you want to keep it cool. And if you are breastfeeding, a lot of moms say that putting breast milk really helps their baby's sunburn. And then you want to, it's counterintuitive, but if they've been sunburned, actually going out and having them out in the sunset light as the day is cooling off, that is going to be really, really helpful for your baby, because that long infrared sunlight, it's actually been proven to the infrared light can make your collagen grow faster, so sunburns can actually heal faster. So that's adult research. They haven't tested that on babies, but anecdotally from the community, that's what moms, on the rare occasion that their baby gets a sunburn, then that's what we're doing. And then obviously you would take it easy the next day, but that sunrise the next day would also be another opportunity where exposing their sunburn to the very, very, very first sun of the day and the very, very last sun of the day could be helpful. Okay. All right. And another chat. Okay. This is your last chance, everyone. Any final questions? Toss them in the chat. Oh, wow. So interesting about sun exposure and digestive fire. My baby just got diagnosed with milk protein sensitivity. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's so frustrating, which is sad because I love fermented dairy a lot. And I wonder if I can reintroduce it later with sun exposure. Yes. I remember, a long, long time ago, and my daughter was having a lot of skin issues. And so, I was doing a gluten-free diet with her, and I was visiting my grandfather, and he was laughing at me, and he's like, back in my day, we just kept going and waited for them to grow out of it. We didn't do anything different at all. And I remember my dad telling that too, like, oh, it's sad babies always get all the skin issues, as though it was just totally normal and you just like go through. But now I think we do, we don't want our babies to suffer. And we've also, it may be more common now than it was. We're definitely have a lot more circadian disruption. The diet stuff, like the food supply has really changed. So that's interesting, but a little anecdote for you guys there. Thank you. This was fantastic. Oh, thank you. I'll also be watching the replay. Okay, wonderful. Yep, I'll definitely send the replay out, and I'll attach the slides to it too, so you can look through those. Okay. All right. Last question, everyone. Are you supposed to see the sun when it breaks the horizon, or just any morning sunlight for circadian health? So, ideally, you're getting the full spectrum of light across the day, going out periodically across. But the reality is that we're busy moms. We get tired. We're going through crazy sleep upsets and this and that. And so whatever light that you can get first thing, that is the best light for you on that day. And over time, things will adjust so that you are able to and feeling good waking up first thing with that. And that also brings up one of the other questions I know people always have, which is what if sunrise, like if you don't have a clear view of the horizon, if there's a mountain or buildings blocking your view. And so when you can use your lux meter in the morning to see how bright the light is, but basically when you're in less direct light, you might need to stay out longer compared with if you have an unobstructed view, but you still get the benefit, and you can test like what's it like inside of your house and what's it like outside, and you pretty much will always see that it's brighter outside than it is inside. And that's the effect that you want, is that you're getting your circadian rhythm entrained to the actual day. All right. Thank you all so much for coming. This was such a joy. And thank you all for participating in the chat. And I look forward to seeing you all around. Thank you. Bye.